Ty with Ty the dog guy on the daily. Forgot my selfie stick at home, so you get to watch my dog Chocolate Chip, and there she goes and pees. What I want to talk about today on today's podcast is humane or not humane. Now, there's one thing that I've said before, and for those that don't necessarily understand dog training and how dogs think and how dogs work, you know, they can often get confused by this. One thing that I've said is that using correction in dog training is the most humane way to train. Now, I'm countering that against, there's this kind of, over the past 10-15 years, there's been this movement in dog training. To be honest, it's based more on like public relations and somewhat feel-goodery than it is actual science of dog training and how dogs learn. But there's been this movement that says, okay, don't use corrections, only use positive reinforcement. You know, behaviors that we don't like. Chip! Good girl. Don't run too far. Behaviors that we don't like jumping or aggression, you know, we either just try to ignore them like jumping, or we try to desensitize the dog to their triggers. The problem is these things don't work very well. And so, like I say, I'm on the record as saying that that style of training is actually far less humane than a style of training that uses correction when done properly. Because obviously you can use correction like a real jerk. You can take a newspaper and hit your dog. But when I say correction used properly, what I'm talking about is teaching the dog and then using correction as a means for proofing the dog. Chip, come on. Not, never like any emotion, never looking for any sort of big pain or anything like that, but really just correction as a method of teaching. So like I said, the reason why I feel that a balanced or stabilized approach is more humane and treat-only training, or sometimes called non-aversive training or what have you, is less humane, is because no matter what, there is pain and discomfort in any dog. So let's say we're talking about that dog that has aggression issues. The anti-aversive trainer would say, oh, well, let's just, let's desensitize him to his triggers, let's counter condition those triggers, and let's have him, just slowly work lower and lower thresholds. But what happens is that dog is living in pain that whole time. You might take months and months and months and months and months, or even years, to effectively counter condition some aggression, and there's definitely a limit. You cannot counter condition everything. You cannot desensitize everything. And so what a lot of these trainers have to either do is medicate or just manage, where they just don't allow dogs around their triggers and things like that. And so anyways, no matter what style of training you're doing, you're subjecting your dog to discomfort. Now, I might use discomfort in the form of a correction on a leash or e-collar. But what happens in doing that is we can get to a place much quicker, much more effectively, where the dog can think normal, think through an issue, think through a problem. Whereas if I'm just using counter conditioning and desensitization, the dog will have to exist in pain for much longer, in pain and discomfort. Now, in this case, the pain and discomfort is coming from the dog's own, it's internal, right? Whereas with a leash correction or something, it's external. And so that's a main difference, but the huge difference here is that in using a stabilized approach, we don't have to rely on the dog to eventually figure it out. We can really push the dog in a direction in a humane way to where they figure it out. So is there discomfort in a leash correction? Yes. Is there discomfort in an e-collar correction? Sometimes, depending on how you do it. So is there discomfort? Absolutely. But there is no way around discomfort in training your dog. So if you think that by, I'm not going to give corrections, I'm just going to give my dog love when he does something right, your dog is existing in discomfort externally. There's external factors that lead to more and more discomfort on your dog's part, and more than likely you're leaving your dog in that state of mind for longer periods of time than what could be accomplished with a balanced approach, and much quicker getting the dog over these issues. So that's where I say, if you're an anti-aversive and that's kind of your style and what you want to do. I don't blame the what's the word I'm looking for? I don't blame the thought, because it's a nice thought, but it just isn't supported by the science. It isn't supported. Chocolate chip, come on. She wants that bird. It just isn't supported by the science. It isn't supported by how dogs think, by how dogs learn, how dogs react. And so, like I say, it requires the dog to exist in pain, sometimes for their whole life. You know, if we're talking about a dog that has serious aggression issues, and he has to be medicated, and he has to be, you know, relegated to a crate for his whole life, you know, that's a bigger pain than a handful of corrections might ever be. So consider that when you're looking at how you want to get your dog trained. That isn't to say that just correcting your dog is the absolute humane way to go. There's lots of teaching. There's lots of you know, other things that need to be taken into account. But I can absolutely tell you that being anti-aversive is the least humane way to train a dog.